So my name's Maggie McGhee, and I'm the Executive Director of Strategy and Governance at ACCA. And we are absolutely delighted to be joined today by Richard Moriarty, the Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Reporting Council. And the plan for today is very much to have an open discussion, conversation on the current state of play, looking at the UK's audit and corporate governance framework, looking at audit reform, but also taking stock of the current external environment, both the political and economic, and hopefully we can cover some of the larger projects that the FRC are currently engaged on, Richard. So a warm welcome to you.
Lovely to be with you today, Maggie, and thank you for this opportunity.
Excellent. Well, as Chelsea said, we really would welcome your questions. So please do put those in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we have time to cover those as we go through the conversation and towards the end of the call. But as a bit of a starter question, Richard, obviously in January 2026, January of this year, the government announced that actually the transition to becoming ARGA would be paused, and instead the approach would be to strengthen the FRC's existing powers. So it'd be wonderful to get your reflections on that, and actually also looking ahead, how do you see the FRC evolving over the next few years, particularly as we know the regulatory landscape continues to develop in the UK?
Thanks, Maggie. If I can start on that last point, please. I think the FRC's got a really important role to play in supporting UK economic growth and the public interest through the work we do in setting high standards for governance, financial reporting and audit quality. And I think these themes are enduring, and particularly in an uncertain world, actually more important now than they ever were. So a little disappointed not to get the full bill, and I can appreciate the pressures on the government. I'm sure all your members can appreciate the pressures on the government. Audit reform's not highest in their priorities when we have conflicts around the world and other things that are taking ministerial time. But I was pleased they committed to modernising my organisation through putting us on a proper statutory footing. I think that will really help, and giving us some clauses in a future bill to do that. But I think in terms of the vision for the organisation, our core purpose, that's enduring. You know, we're in the confidence business at the FRC, the confidence of building trust with key stakeholders about business and their governance, their financial reporting and audit. And of course, your members, accountants and auditors are such a critical ingredient to that trust and confidence in UK PLC.
Excellent. No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more in terms of we're in the business of trust and confidence. That is the distinct value that a professional accountant brings to the organisations that they work for, but the organisations that they serve. So I couldn't agree more. I think we were also disappointed in terms of the announcement, but very much looking forward to working with the FRC as you're placed on the statutory footing and as you evolve. So obviously you've talked about a sort of continuation in terms of the global recognition we have for great standard setting in the UK, and I don't think we should ever forget that. What do you see as the key priorities, therefore, shaping the FRC?
Yeah, there's a number of key priorities we've got at the moment, and some of these build on the progress we've made in the last few years. Unashamedly, one of our key priorities starts with audit quality. And making sure we continue on the journey we've been on over the last few years. UK audit quality now stands in reasonable, good place actually, compared to international peers. And credit to everyone that's been involved in that, the profession, individual auditors, firms, corporate clients being a bit more discerning, and indeed the regulators played a role. There's been a system response over the past few years to get audit quality up. It's one of the reasons, being a victim of our own success, that politicians didn't see the burning platform on audit quality to generate the interest for the bill compared to where we were in 2018. So, but be that as it may, audit quality is one of these things that you can't take for granted. You don't crack it. You've got to continue to invest and take care of it. So audit quality will be a key focus. How we go about that is about to change, though, and change quite significantly. We are quite leveraged to a model of file inspections for ascertaining audit quality. I'm very keen to move this more in the direction of systems of overall quality management amongst the firms and have a blended approach when we evaluate the firms that gives us a score based on not just their file inspections, perhaps we'll do less of those, but our view on their systems of quality management and assurance. So a big change of our regulatory model, which we will start to roll out from next month, but it will be a journey. It's not something that changes overnight, but that's definitely the direction of travel. So audit quality, number one, will be a bedrock priority for us. Second thing for me is to support good governance around the country and through our economy. I believe with the UK Corporate Governance Code, we've got something that is a competitive strength internationally. It's based on principles. There are only 18. It's enforced by market participants, not by courts or regulators. Very, very different if you're in the States and you're having to submit to Sarbanes-Oxley, or you're in the EU with much more prescriptive governance requirements. So done properly, I think our governance code could be a strength for UK PLC. But I worry, Maggie, that over time what we've seen is a development of a compliance culture around that code, which has made boards and their advisors quite risk averse about using its flexibility to depart from some of the provisions. But I'm really keen to get across the message that a cogent, transparent explanation is much, much more valuable as a sign of good governance than a blind box ticking approach. So good governance is something that we will continue to push. Also on reporting, I think we can all agree that the volume of annual reports in terms of number of pages and the cost that goes into it, both financial costs, but also the cost of bandwidth, directors and boards spending their time poring over these reports. It's increased over time for all sizes of businesses, and this is a public and private thing. It's not just about listed businesses here. So I'm really supportive of the government's modernising corporate reporting programme, which I'm hoping will be published in the next couple of months, because I want this to be a once in a generation reset moment for really understanding what is the nature of this annual report, who's it for, is it serving that purpose, and are there things that can either yield greater utility for the audience, or if it's not yielding utility, let's take it out and avoid the cost, because the requirements around annual reports and accounts are a bit like geological layers. They've built up over time, but no one's ever taken anything off. So they've just become bigger. A couple of other things we're doing, which I hope will be of interest to your members. I'm really keen that as the FRC, we have a compelling offer for the small and medium entity part of the market. Naturally, a lot of our work is related to big business and the public interest entity audit market, but we are the authority for the whole audit market, and I'm really keen that that audit market works effectively. That starts with having firms that have great professionals that are really passionate about what they do and bring their professionalism to bear. It should be a growing market, a vibrant market. But I think we're also starting to see changes in that market, Maggie, which we as the FRC need to keep tabs on to really understand the opportunities and threats. One is the rise of private capital and consolidation in the market, but also technology and artificial intelligence. So personally, and I am an optimist who always sees the glass half full, I'm quite excited about the future for accountants and auditors with these opportunities. I appreciate there's some challenges there, but I'm a great believer that this is a profession that can rise to that challenge.
Excellent. Well, I love the priorities that you focused on there, Richard. I think we'll come back to them as we chat on during the course of this call. But I think the fact that you started with audit quality as a previous auditor, I completely agree with. But I did love the guidance that came out earlier this week, actually, on the corporate governance code, and in terms of how do we engage investors, how do we help people to understand the importance of a comply or explain provision. So I think that was really excellent. So thank you. So I think we'll revisit these. And again, to people on the call, do put your questions in if there's areas that you'd like us to delve a bit deeper into. In terms of your tenure at the FRC, so you joined October 2023. Actually feels longer ago than that, Richard. But in terms of that, so two two and a bit years in, but also you're the first year into your 3-year plan. And in that 3-year plan, you had your revised purpose. And it would be really good to understand how's that landing actually with your own team, but also with the broader stakeholders that you engage with.
Yeah, I was very keen to work with my board on refreshing our purpose because I was keen to get away from a a uh, a binary description of regulation that's used in the popular media. So often the popular media will talk about regulation or growth, regulation holding back growth, and you have more of one, less of the other. For me, and I've been around regulation in both public and private sectors for many years, this is about common sense and smart regulation. And actually, where it supports standards, where it supports market confidence, that's credit positive to investment. That's credit positive to the location decision to come to the UK rather than other jurisdictions. So I was very keen to position our purpose as credit positive to growth, whilst making sure, particularly for audit, we're really conscious and sensitive to that broader public interest that comes from audit, and nest it within a broader system. Because too often people will say, where were the auditors? Where were the accountants? My first question is, where were the board of directors? Where was the first line of defence? And it's really important that we recognise that actually everyone's got a role to play in this system, and it starts with good governance in the boardroom. Businesses don't fail because, or they don't tend to fail because they had bad auditors. They tend to fail because they made bad business decisions or their market's been disrupted, etc., etc. So we need to think about this as a system. I've been very pleased with the way my organisation has responded to this. We are looking at some of our regulatory models now, so we're doing the hard yards of some of the internal change programs. It's evolution, not revolution, but I am quite keen to make progress this year, particularly by looking at overhauling our audit supervision and our enforcement models, because it's really important that we think about how we align our regulatory models for the future in the next 5 years. Obviously, a lot of what we've done was born out of a painful time for the profession around 2018, with a number of celebrated failures. John Kingman did a seminal study on the audit market and indeed the FRC. We must never forget the lessons that that report told us, but nor should we be a hostage to a particular point in time when the future demands something different. And particularly with technology and changes in the market, we've got to make sure we make the changes today to be match fit for the future.
Excellent. No, it's really good to hear how it's landing well in terms of the engagement. And I think the way you were talking about it there, I think it's true. Sometimes people talk about, is it an enforcement regulator or an improvement regulator? And I always think, well, you can't have one without the other. It's a balance
Maggie, completely
between
agree.
them.
Completely agree. And look, I always say enforcement is something that regulators have to do, because where there are serious, sustained, significant failings, the public interest and indeed the political interest is that individuals, companies are held to account, and there's an effective, fair, just mechanism for doing that. But I also strongly believe that that is not the only role of a regulator. A regulator has a unique privilege in sitting across a whole market. It is the keeper of the industry secrets. It has obviously a lot of intelligence and data about how the market is operating. And in the right type of way, I would like regulators and indeed my organisation to offer something back that helps the system improve, because I have a very simple outlook on life, which is prevention is so much better than cure. And also, when you are regulating professionals by definition want to do the right thing. Yeah, they want to improve. That's why they've gone into a profession. So I think whether you're regulating pilots, as I once did, or lawyers, as I once did, or accountants, it starts from an earnest place that I'm dealing with professionals who want to do the right thing. In any population, of hundreds of thousands of people, you're going to get some people that do the wrong thing, and you're going to get good people who make the wrong decision because of other factors. And that's just inevitable when you have a big population. But, I think the privilege of regulating a profession is to work on the assumption that those professionals get up every day because they want to do a professional job.
Absolutely. And that takes me back to when we were giving evidence actually at the Parliamentary Select Committee as part of these reforms. And in one of the questions we were asked, I was actually saying, well, do you know, an auditor doesn't get out of bed in the morning wanting to do a bad job. That's not the premise from where we start. So that's really excellent in terms of it. It'd be good to go back to the sort of opening priorities that you talked about and perhaps start to explore those in a bit of detail. So the UK is clearly going through a period of regulatory reform, both in corporate reporting that you mentioned, also in audit. So from the FRC's perspective, what are the most important changes that members should be preparing for in the near term? And then perhaps as we go on, we'll look to the longer term and the impact of technology, etc.
Yeah, it's a great question, Maggie, and I think there are a number of answers to this, or an answer that has many parts. We've made a couple of changes to the corporate governance code where I would hope boards, company directors will be much more curious to be asking accountants and auditors the right question and using accountants and auditors as real strategic advisors. Two areas. One, we updated the code to put much more focus on systems of internal control and risk management, and how boards gain assurance over those material controls. That came into effect in January. So already boards and directors are asking this question about, whether they are in the right place here. What are my material controls, and how do I know I'm assured that they're working correctly? Accountants and auditors have a key role to play in that. And then there's the point that we discussed earlier around boards thinking for themselves and owning their judgment on the comply or explain principle, where actually accountants, auditors have a really, I think, good role to play in guiding boards through that discussion using judgment rather than sort of tick box exercises. So that's on the corporate governance side. The other reforms that I think are just worth noting is in terms of how we go about our regulation. I mentioned before that we're moving slightly away from file inspections, more to systems of quality management. So really putting pressure on firms to take ownership for how do they provide a consistent, high quality audit experience, one that is replicatable. It doesn't take away professional judgment. There will always be a role for the individual professional auditor on those fine judgments, of course, but putting more pressure on the firms to develop their methodologies and raise their game on systems of quality management. And then I think there is a more general conversation to be had about technology and what this means for the role of accountants and auditors in the future. I'm optimistic about this, but I do think that is a conversation that we ought to be having as a profession.
Excellent. I think we'll come back to technology later because I'd like to delve in a bit. We couldn't have a conversation without the use of the words AI. That it just cannot happen now.
It's not allowed. It's not allowed.
So we'll come back to that bit later. But I do think the focus that's now being placed on quality management and systems as opposed to just the file reviews is a really positive development, because actually that's what enhances audit quality overall far more broadly. And also there was almost a slight sort of misuse of the samples used in terms of relatively small samples and then how they could be utilized. So I think from a engagement perspective and really allowing people to understand the value and the benefits of audit, I think this is a really positive development.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that made me sad was how too many people over interpreted the AQR inspection scores and extrapolated across the whole population of audits rather than the risk-based audits and the relatively small samples of risk-based audits that we actually looked at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it led to quite a sort of distorted view I think, that wasn't helpful to the profession, wasn't helpful to business, and not helpful to the broader economy. And then sort of linked, actually, if we take it outside a bit, in the broader economy, I mean, growth and investment, obviously key priorities for the UK economy. In what way do you think the reforms that you're discussing here will actually support confidence and sustainable growth in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to see, and I sincerely hope we are going to see, a return to growth in this country, then a key ingredient of that is investor and stakeholder confidence in UK PLC. And we're part of that confidence building, confidence through good governance, confidence through quality financial reporting that hits the mark in terms of utility, but doesn't just bake in lots of inappropriate, disproportionate cost, but also confidence in terms of the numbers and the fact that they have been independently audited. So if you look around the world and you think about the world being quite uncertain at the moment, there's a real opportunity, I think, for the UK to position itself as a place of a high degree of confidence in the fundamentals for business and predictability and stability. I appreciate we've got to have a political and macro climate that goes with that, but I do think that there is a real opportunity for the UK here, with regulators like the FRC leaning in by helping create the conditions. We can't create GDP growth ourselves. I mean, it's a total fallacy to say regulators can magic up growth. If we could, believe me, I'd be adding a couple of decimal places every morning if I could. What we can do, though, is to try and create the right climate, the right environment, the right atmosphere for businesses to flourish. And that starts with creating confidence around UK PLC.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it was great to see the accountancy profession called out within the UK industrial strategy. And it is about creating that environment to allow the UK to flourish and for businesses to flourish.
Totally right, Maggie. I was really pleased to see the government's industrial strategy, professional services and accountancy drawn out. I mean, we're shy about this because that's the way, I guess, in our culture. But the export of accountancy and audit and professional services is a great British success story. We ought not to be hubristic and we ought not to be complacent, but it is a great success story nonetheless, and we should build on that success.
Absolutely. And we're so respected globally for our standards currently in terms of the approach. And the FRC, clearly a regulator that inspires many others. We know from all of our engagement globally how often people are wanting to reach out, seek out the expertise of the FRC. And it's always great when actually, in terms of how responsive the FRC is to those requests.
Yeah, and it's a two-way street, Maggie. I mean, we learn as well. I mean, on our systems of quality management, for instance, we've been speaking a lot to our Canadian colleagues who have developed a system of quality management. So I think it's really important that bodies like mine engage with colleagues around the world, because after all, we all want the same thing.
We do, exactly. And business is global these days as well. So we want
Absolutely.
interoperability between different regimes. So I couldn't agree more. On this call today, there will be account auditors. There will also be, because we have a very broad base of membership. Our members work in business as well as practice, many in the public sector, lots of them on boards. You've sort of touched on it at parts, but what do you see the role of the professional accountant playing in really helping organisations adapt to these evolving expectations around governance that we've touched briefly upon, reporting and assurance? What's your call to action to our members on the call?
I mean, put simply, I think accountants, pardon me, including your members, have a fantastic role to play in basically helping businesses succeed in the future. And if I take the core components of the things that the FRC cares about, good governance, accountants are really good at understanding those commercial judgments that need to be made on particularly corporate governance code. And in a world where I'm asking businesses to take those judgments, naturally boards will reach out, I'm sure, to some advisors. And it's really important that we don't just default to a tick box, but we exercise that professional judgment. And after all, that's stock in trade for accountants to exercise their judgment. Reporting and making sure that is high utility for users of accounts. Again, accountants got a great role to play. And then finally on audit, that trust and confidence piece. And this is where I think people need to never forget what it is to be a professional, which is ultimately it's in the eyes of the beholder and the eyes of the broader public that they entrust in you, that you will uphold the public interest, and they give you that trust, they give you that legitimacy. And what it means is that, particularly for auditors, although naturally you're absolutely commercial, you're serving your clients, you've also got in mind, that professional ethics to the broader public interest. And for me, that defines a profession. If you haven't got that broader public interest, you're not a profession. Actually, you're just a service industry. So it's really important that I think we don't forget that public interest. That is the hallmark of the professional. But I do believe that accountancy, and your organisation's great at this, Maggie, drawing people in. And even if you don't remain a practicing accountant or an auditor, it's a fantastic platform to engage with, understand how businesses work, what they need, what the pressures are upon them to go on to bigger and better things in your career. So I'm not an accountant, but actually, so I probably can say this. I think it's a fantastic entry route for future careers. Whether you stay an accountant or an auditor, it still provides that great springboard.
Absolutely. And I think the trust bit is so critical, because that is what distinguishes us as a profession, that trust and that ethical behavior. And we're all guardians of that, because I think the phrase is that, trust is slowly won and easily lost. I think arrives on a donkey and leaves on a cheetah is the sort of phrase that's often used about it. But it's so true,
So
and we
true.
need to make sure that we've got that at the forefront of our minds and in our engagement. In your response there, you sort of linked about the breadth of skills it gives you. And actually that links on to what is quite a common sort of discussion point these days, which is the attractiveness of the profession. So I am an accountant, and I was very attracted to the profession, and I've loved the career that it's provided me with. But we do hear some challenges about the future attractiveness of the professions. I think it's really important, the message you said there about actually the breadth of skills that people develop through their training, but also through the experience they obtain as they're working as accountants, and indeed audit, which I think is a great grounding for any individual in the accountancy space.
Absolutely. And, I think it's really important that particularly the professional bodies and the firms constantly challenge themselves on making sure they have a compelling narrative and proposition, particularly for the next generation coming through. The worst thing I think professions can do is to rest on their laurels, that because they've been around 150 years, they're impervious to disruption and change. I mean, whisper it, I do think that if we had Armageddon tomorrow, the surviving species would be lawyers and accountants. So I do think those two professions are brilliant at reinventing themselves through disruption. And look, after all, if you look at accountancy over the last few decades, accountants survived the calculator, they survived the spreadsheet. They are really good at understanding how to adapt to, move on, and add value to technology. But ultimately, there are some enduring facets here. That point about trust is so important. For business to work, people have got to trust people. And partly the accountant is central to providing that trust.
No, that's fantastic. And I think in terms of our role, we see this as an absolutely critical element. So our strategy is very much about redefining the accountant. And that's very much about recognizing actually the work that we do today which is far broader. And it's also about speaking to people outside the profession. So often in the profession, you talk to individuals within the profession, you're talking to the same people. For me to see success in that, it's actually how you redefine accountancy for the broader public.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a link here, Maggie, with the trust,
Yeah,
because actually it is the public that whose trust you need to earn and maintain. And often the public, if I spoke to my daughters about public trust in audit, I'm sure they would switch off quite quickly. However, when it's not there and there is a breakdown of trust, as there was, I mean, let's be clear,
yeah.
there was a
Let's be
dark
honest, it
period.
was.
Yeah, there was a dark period of 2018, 2019, where there was a public and political breakdown of trust and confidence. It takes years to build back. Your point about the donkey and the cheetah, I think it's absolutely right. And actually, the profession's been living in that shadow for a great many years, even though audit quality has improved over that time, thankfully so. So I do think that broader conversation that we need to have outside of the profession has to recognize that trust piece.
Yeah, no, it is the absolute critical element. And you talked about actually redefining for sort of the future and actually how accountants have historically embraced challenges, made them into opportunities. We're obviously seeing quite significant developments, in particular in sustainability reporting and assurance. Obviously, globally, different views coming through from different governments in terms of that. But from our perspective, we're really seeing businesses embrace sustainability and see actually the long-term value that it provides in terms of their broader business. But how's the FRC positioning the UK within that global landscape in terms of it?
Yeah, Maggie, we've done a number of things. We've worked at the international level to develop the reporting standards. So our experts, because it is, as you say, global standards is what business wants and needs. And we certainly believe that rather than British exceptionalism, if something can be done at an international level, that's got to be good for growth, particularly given, just how important it is to be a trading nation for our economy. So we were very influential in developing the S1, S2 reporting standards. We've been working with our colleagues at the Financial Conduct Authority and in government in terms of the legislation that will implement that, or the rules that will implement that. But we've also got a role in the assurance provision market. And again, accountants have a key role to play here because, although whisper it, I'm quite keen not to enfranchise the monopoly to accountants. I think it is important that other professions have a fair crack of the whip. Look, who's in pole position to offer a really compelling assurance provision service? Well, actually, accountants have already got the professional ethics. They know about assurance. They know about control testing, et cetera, et cetera. And I think this adjacent market is one that we will see growing over time. I mean, naturally, different political cycles, different nations will have different views on this because it does have a political overlay, as you mentioned. But as a societal trend, inevitably, I think the direction is one way in terms of seeing more of it. So there is a growth opportunity here for accountants. And one thing that we will do is to establish later this year a voluntary register for UK-based assurance providers. That's quite helpful. It's also helpful for reducing friction and barriers. So it allows some of our accountants to sign off reports under CSRD for EU requirements. So again, just trying to reduce that friction across borders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And our key policy position actually is the importance of global standards. So we constantly reinforce that message. And we do see a huge opportunity within sustainability. We don't agree that it should be we believe in profession agnostic in terms of this. That doesn't believe, as you said, actually, that accountants aren't exceptionally well placed to meet that with the structures that they have in place within their firms and with the skills that they develop through their engagement with business in terms of it. So great to hear in terms of all of the developments. We're actually adopting S1 and S2 on a voluntary basis this year, trying to sort of demonstrate the value, because it is about that sort of longer term value for a business. And it goes back to your corporate governance. It's not about compliance. It's about actually, you need this information. These thought processes should inform how you develop your strategy, how you deliver business, and that's what will give you longer term growth. So,
yeah.
Excellent. So that's definitely one of the drivers of opportunity within accountancy. The other element that we've touched on briefly, that's certainly changing the profession, is technology, and in particular AI. It's rarely out of the headlines. It feels like my inbox is flooded with all the different thought leadership that's coming through, in particular in AI. But it'd be really good to see, how's the FRC approaching it? How is it being innovative in its own use of technology? And also from the FRC's perspective, we can explore a bit of AI, because great opportunities, but also risk.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I totally resonate with the inbox. I feel concussed from being hit with so much, like avalanches of AI material, piercing through that to work out the big picture and what we should do. I think is the art form. I mean, first of all, looking at the market. Undoubtedly, AI and or its successive generations will have an impact on the market that we oversee, both because of what preparers and corporates do, but also how audit and accountancy firms wish to deploy that technology. So it's definitely part of the future. I think it's really important to step back and ask ourselves a foundational question, which is, as the FRC, what do we regulate? I don't see that we're going to be in the business of regulating algorithms. We're in the business of regulating humans for their deployment of algorithms. And it goes back to the trust piece and assurance piece. So the question I've got for firms developing AI for release into audit products is, by all means, use enabling technology. You do that already with spreadsheets and other technologies. But you're still accountable. You're still accountable for what that technology does, to your clients, to the public interest, and also us as your regulator. So this is another reason why moving in the direction of systems of quality management and assurance is absolutely the right approach, because it helps us capture those questions about technology. But I also think there's a number of questions that we as a system need to think through. So undoubtedly some opportunities here. The ability to do horizon scanning, risk scanning, the ability to look at large populations of data to offer greater assurance rather than just samples, the ability in real time to trace transactions, all of that stuff potentially is valuable and an upside. But there's also risks. As anyone who's used ChatGPT and other, sorry, I should not just them, but other AI technologies, they can hallucinate. They can purport to show quite authoritative sources that, when you actually try and go to those sources, don't exist. So we've got to be really careful about this technology and balance the risk and the opportunities. I also think there's a longer term thing that the professions need to think through, which is, if AI is really going to impact the first 1, 2, 3, 4 runs of an accountant's career and automate things, how do we get people from entry to run 5 on the ladder? Now, accountants have done this in the past. They've done it with a calculator. They've done it with the spreadsheet. And I do believe that if they lean into this, again, they will refresh and reinvent, reimagine the profession to add real value and grow with it. But I am hearing from a number of sources that question about, in an AI-enabled world, how you develop people through the apprenticeship, if I can use that expression, is a really valid question to answer. In terms of the FRC, we are using AI in some sources. I mean, look, we're naturally going to be on the sort of more risk averse of the spectrum here. We have confidential data, we've got to be careful, but where we can automate certain tasks, where we can use AI to drive efficiency and effectiveness, I'm very keen that we do so. So like most organizations, we do have an AI suite of tools, which is a closed system. So our data doesn't leak out of the organization. I would say, Maggie, we're at the sort of stage of the life cycle where we're automating tasks.
Yeah.
At the moment, we're not quite at the stage of the cycle where we're transforming. We're not at the transformative stage yet. That will come, but I suspect an organisation like mine will probably not be a pioneer and more be a sort of a fast or a perhaps not so fast follower.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's I think recognizing actually where people sit within that sort of ecosystem of AI is really important in terms of it. You want to lead and be best in breed rather than a leader in AI itself. I do like your point about you don't think you'd ever be sort of showing algorithms, and I think it's good because it does come down to professional judgment, the individual, how it's used, how it's interpreted, and I think anything that takes us down to, well, it's the algorithm, I think is the challenge in terms of it. But you raised a really interesting point on experience. I think, and experience has changed over the years. When I first started as an auditor, it was very much you did certain roles. We all remember the stock takes at year end, the sort of first year roles, second year roles. So I think there's a key role for professional bodies to play in this space. How do we work with employers to support the experience that's provided, but also, in terms of giving those employability skills, so the softer skills, and that's something that we ourselves are looking at through our new qualification. So how do we provide those sort of softer skills that link directly into things? So excellent. You talked earlier about actually the annual report and the work that you hope the government was taking forward, the very lengthy reports, and I think we've all seen some of the ones in the banking and financial services where they are a huge tome of information. I mean, the annual report will always be important. Absolutely. But they have grown exponentially over time. And I think at times well, we want the information and we want somebody to have reviewed the information. So where should we put it? And it becomes almost the default into the annual report. What do you hope to see emerging from the exercise the government's running at this point?
Yeah, it's a great observation, Maggie. It's often the skip that lots of people throw their policies in because it's the one place where they hope that it will be fairly reported and audited through an independent third party. I think we've got to start with a fundamental question, which is who's the annual report for? And does it serve those needs, and how should it serve those needs? There's going to be some givens here, international accounting standards, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of particularly the narrative end of the report, really boiling it down to that which is essential and high utility information, particularly for shareholders, and avoiding the temptation, and actually government is probably the worst culprit of this, using the annual report as basically an information gathering exercise. Wouldn't it be nice if companies reported on X, Y, and Z? And of course, each of these individual issues, X, Y, and Z, has a sort of origin where you think, I sort of understand why you as a government might want to have that information. But the default, and I think you used exactly the right phrase, the default of saying it must be in the annual report is lazy thinking, but it's also costly thinking, because as soon as it's in the annual report, it incurs two costs. One is the direct costs of production and audit, if it's part of the audited part of the annual report. And secondly, it's the bandwidth cost, which actually can be a higher cost because you've got people at the top of organizations who should be spending their time on entrepreneurial activities to grow their business and drive for the future, really poring over these very long annual reports and accounts. And I appreciate much of this could be done by audit committees, but that's not really the point. You're still soaking up valuable board bandwidth that could be spent on more entrepreneurial tasks and activities. And therefore, I think the question for colleagues in government is, if you're going to have it in the annual report, are you absolutely convinced that it serves the right purpose and the benefits outweigh the cost? And if you do need the information, is there another way of getting it? I mean, government all the time asks businesses for information and data returns, etc., etc. But do you have to use the medium of the annual report and accounts for it? The other reason why I'm very keen to have this discussion, Maggie, is too often over time, the requirement has really landed heavily on listed businesses, not private businesses, because of the requirements of London Stock Exchange, the listing rules. I mean, government often has just said, right, okay, we need it done, so let's have it in the annual report and accounts for listed businesses. And of course, once upon a time, our listed businesses were the largest businesses in the country. But of course, corporate Britain and capital structure has changed fundamentally in the last 20, 30 years. And we now have very, very large, important businesses that are privately held, that report to different standards. And, you know, that just feels really odd to me. So I do think, done right, this hopefully could be a sort of once in a, generation, once in a blue moon, fundamental reset, fundamental conversation about the purpose and utility of annual reports and accounts. But after all, it is a trust product. I keep saying, an annual report and account, it's not a marketing brochure, it's a trust product.
Yeah, no, quite right. And I think it's about making this the once in a lifetime opportunity to really look at, I think starting with the who's it for, what's it for, I think is absolutely right. And of course, with these things get added, as you said at the outset, every year something gets added, but everybody's very slow to take anything away from it in terms of it. So
Absolutely.
So a great opportunity. So I think we will certainly be championing with the government to make the most of that opportunity. I'm conscious that I've monopolised all the questions and I could go on for quite some time, Richard. But
Pleasure,
we do
Maggie,
have
pleasure.
Glenn on the call. So Glenn Collins, who's our head of technical and strategic engagement. And Glenn, you have been managing the Q&A function. So I believe you're now in an opportunity where you can pose Richard, and very happy to jump in on any questions as well. Richard and myself some questions. So can I hand across to you at this point, Glenn?
Thank you, Maggie, and thank you, Richard. I think following on from your last question, Maggie, James and others have indicated some real support about making financial reports more accessible and actually achieving their ultimate goals in which they were set up. And Richard, you used the word which I particularly like, of geological layers being added into reports over a period of time. Quite an easy question, but what would you say to our audience about getting involved and actually highlighting the areas which doesn't make sense to them anymore, of why they're in the reports and are they of value within the reports? So a question out there is to, why would you say to people, or how would you explain to people why it's important they get involved in the consultation that's coming up?
Yeah, Glenn, it's a great question, and I would argue that ACCA members are really well placed to offer great feedback to this government consultation because of your size and your scale and your breadth. Your membership advises or works for businesses up and down this country and also internationally as well. So has that really important reference point about what works or what doesn't in other jurisdictions. So I really would encourage members to take account, read the government consultation when it's published, and use your experience and use your expertise to contribute both to the organisations' response through ACCA, but also to the extent that you wish to make individual contributions, please do. It's a really important exercise the government's doing, and your members and your students have such a rich overview of our economy. It'll be great to see a great response from members.
And Maggie, any comments from you on that?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think often it's the practical experience that comes through that is so critical. You're the people who are actually sort of either preparing or auditing this, and actually your experience, your engagement is just so valuable in terms of it. So we need to get this right. I think it is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So we do want as many views as possible. So please do share those with ACCA or put your own response in. We're very, very supportive of firms and individuals who want to do that. So yeah, I think all contributions in this one is so vitally important.
So yeah, very much looking forward to that modernisation. Another question we've had from Louis, and the comment is, how transferable do you think the private sector reforms will be across to the public sector, and what could be learned between both?
A great question from Louis. I mean, if this is about reporting and the difference in reporting requirements between private and the public listed sector, I mean, one difference obviously is about the concentration of ownership in the private, and obviously in a lot, not always, but often private owners are closer and have more proximity to the decision makers. Sometimes they are the decision makers in some of these businesses. So the purpose of annual report and accounts is slightly different in that sense. You don't have that large dispersed shareholder base which are uninvolved that you have in listed equity. So I can understand why you might have subtly, and I stress the word subtly, different provisions on listed businesses to private businesses. But I think also, again, this foundational question of who the accounts are for needs to be answered, because we went through a period, I think, particularly in the 90s and noughties, where you heard the term stakeholder capitalism, and the annual report isn't just for shareholders, investors, but for a much broader range of folk, including the broader public, obviously creditors, NGOs, etc., employees, pensioners, etc., etc. And I think it's really important that we have that debate, because obviously that debate then drives the requirements that are in the annual report and accounts. And I'm not for one moment saying that those additional stakeholders to shareholders are not important. I'm not saying that at all. They are vitally important. But the question is, are their informational needs best serviced through the annual report and accounts, or are there other vehicles for doing that?
And Maggie, from your public sector experience, any additional comments?
It's an interesting one. So in the UK, in terms of if we look at central government, they use IFRS, as we do, adapted for the public sector, and that's been adapted well. I think in terms of the broader reforms, I think government has probably been more prone in the public sector to put additional requirements into annual reports because of the view that it's therefore audited, and therefore the central government accounts, I wouldn't say they're on a par with, say, if we looked at an HSBC annual report, but they are very, very lengthy documents. And I think it's probably an interesting one there in terms of who's the user. So you've got Parliament, a key user, who'll actually hold public account committee sessions on predominantly value for money, but also financial audit. So you've got that key user, but then you've actually got the stakeholder, the taxpayer, who does want to see where their money's been spent. So I think there's a different element. I don't think it's necessarily through the annual report and accounts that can really explain how has a department met its objectives, how is it allocated its resources, and how is it delivered its policy objectives. So I think it's the marriage of those two elements that's absolutely critical. But I would definitely say and I'm sure users and preparers across government would say the same, that we should be making sure that the opportunity is taken in the public sector to reduce the reporting requirements, focus on that. And everyone's aware of the delays in local government in terms of accounts being published, which is not good. It's not good for trust. It's not good for the organisation. It's not good for the taxpayer at the end of the day. So I think lots of opportunity in that space. And I think finally, just briefly, I think actually the broader audit remit in the public sector is interesting, where you've got the regularity element, and that's where I think trust becomes even more critical. So yeah, I think lots that we could learn and should learn.
And speaking on learning, and thank you for the link there, Maggie. We've had comments on, and Richard, you mentioned earlier the importance of data that you actually hold and act on. And there were some comments around actually how you're going to utilize that for even more enhanced education based on some of those risk elements that will come out and actually support both those preparing reports, so financial accountants and advisors as well as auditors as well.
Yeah, that's a great question. We already do some of this because we publish thematic reviews, particularly ahead of reporting season. I'm keen that we do more of that. I think this is very central to our role as an improvement regulator, to feed back to the regulated community what we're seeing, what good practice looks like. But I'm also keen not to crowd out the professional bodies that have a really important role in training and education. There's a question for me about whether all of the actors work as closely and collaboratively together as we could do, because actually a lot of the issues transcend one particular part of the system. We're all having the same conversations, whether they be about AI, whether they be about the future of the market, future of the profession. The more we can use our influence to convene those conversations, and we can learn across organisations, the better. But certainly, Glenn, I would be very keen for ideas on how the FRC can do more in that space of reporting back and offering professionals, but also companies and entities, the value of our role as seeing across the entire market.
I think your confidence comments come through as part of that earlier as well, Richard. So really important aspect. And I suppose a slightly personal question is, you mentioned you've obviously you've worked in regulated areas, aviation and legal. Is there anything you draw on working in those sectors that you'd apply across to your role at FRC and working with accountants? Are there any areas you go and you say, actually, this was really good practice within those sectors?
Yeah, I think there's a commonality, and I made the point earlier about the value of regulating a profession where people get up in the morning wanting to do the right thing, and they have that broader public interest. And of course, the other professions that I'm familiar with have that broader public interest. Well, what I saw in aviation, which was quite successful and undoubtedly improved safety, security standards, was the premium on system learning, and there being a safe space for people to have near misses and make mistakes and learn from them, and improve the system as a result. It's not a consequence-free zone. Serious significant failings, the regulator took action on. But we saw so much more of a culture where the whole system, the entities, the professionals, the regulator work together to try and identify those so-called near misses so we could learn from them and keep the system safe. And I think rather than writing rules, that sort of culture of regulation, all wanting the same thing, all working for the same, if you like, overarching objective, recognizing that there are separate roles in this system. For me, that is something that I would like to push on and implement in accountancy and audit. And you're seeing some of that already, Glenn, through the changes we're making on systems of quality management.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we're also seeing it in the work that you're doing for small and medium-sized entities.
Yes, yes.
So it's been fantastic to see this. Glenn, I think hopefully we haven't left too many unanswered questions, because I'm very conscious, Richard, the time has gone so quickly. We are at the end of the hour. Can I take this opportunity to say a huge thank you for taking the time, but being so open, so eloquent as well, shall I say, in terms of answering our questions and engaging with the audience's question. It's been a real privilege. I think there's so much topics we could discuss. I hope that we will have a further conversation in the not too distant future. But on behalf of everyone on the call, thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you.
Maggie, it's a real pleasure to be with you and engage with you and your members, and I would dearly love to come back at some point. But thank you so much for giving me the platform today.
Excellent. Well, with that, thank you, Richard, and thank you, Glenn, for the questions, and thank you to everyone in the audience for their active participation, their questions, and I hope you found the session enjoyable, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much. Very much, Chelsea, and hello to everyone.